what does it feel like when God is calling you to something new? Like, how do you know that it's happening? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Is God calling you to something new? So if you're wondering, stick with me. First of all, let's recognize that stirring. What does that even look like? A stirring in the waters, holy discontent, some people have said. You just sense there's a new season of purpose. That could be definitely a possibility. Another sign that God may be shifting your season or purpose is you have closed doors. Not something that you keep trying to make something work, but it's not working, right? I don't know if it's a secular book, but I don't know if you've ever read Who Moved My Cheese? That kind of gives the same premise or idea. Like some it's more about job, career shifts and changes, which, oh my gosh, haven't we all dealt with that lately? Just tons of shifts in our job market. So many people that thought, hey, this is this sure way to go, and it just hasn't been. So a lot of closed doors, shifting economy, shifting employment, everything. And so what do you do with that, right? So I guess this might be very much on a lot of people's minds. So there might be a new season, a new purpose. Maybe, okay, so sorry, I was talking about the book. The book is, the mice are in a maze or something, and they see that their cheese has moved. Like, they kept getting the cheese here every time. And the cheese has always come here. This is how I always got my cheese. Cheese being, of course, like, how you make money and provide for your family. This is how I've always gotten my cheese, right? So I'm just going to stay here because I don't like change. And I just want to get the cheese from where it's supposed to go. However, if the cheese is going somewhere else, then you need to sniff out the cheese, right? And so a lot of times they found that, or at least the fictional book anyway, that the mice that weren't willing to shift and move, they ended up starving because the cheese didn't come. And so there were other mice that decided, well, let me go look for other cheese. Let me go see if I can find it somewhere else. And sure enough, they sniffed out and they found the cheese, and they pivoted and found another way to earn cheese, I guess. Now that doesn't factor in God and other circumstances and actually waiting on God and hearing from Him. It's, again, like I said, it is just a secular version of this stirring potentially, or circumstances shifting you getting fired, or not being content, or this not making the rent like it used to, or mortgage or whatever. Something's got to change, right? Something's got to change. You can't do it anymore. Things are happening differently. Okay. So this is similar to what I would say. This is episode 3. And for some reason I've mentioned my husband, poor thing, on a lot of this, and his season in his life. He has gone about something a certain way, and this is how I was getting my cheese before, right? So this is where I want to get it from. I was like, okay, well, but there have been closed doors, and there's also been some stirring that God's been doing in you, and He's been speaking to you about some things. And yeah, He is walking through my book. We'll talk about that later, but let's look there. Let's sit in that for a while, and let's figure out what's going on. And do you, in the meantime, is there something that you can move forward in? And we were just discussing that last night, actually. And he was like, yeah, I do think that it needs to be not just waiting on God, but also moving forward in maybe a different direction, or in growing in certification. He's also in the process of doing some other things that God has been putting on his heart for years and years. But that is too early to share, so I will table that for now. So some other resources that are great at how to discern, to understand God's will, is Experiencing God by Henry Blackaby. I went through that with a friend of mine in college, and it was really good. And I'm also going through that with my son now, to learn to hear from God. My second son, he just really wants to grow in that, and so it's been a great one to do. So my book also, Pinpoint Your Passion, can actually help. I've seen it, the light bulbs come on for a lot of people to clarify their calling even further. And it's not just for Christian moms, but I believe I've already seen it happen for different stage of life, for women and so far for men. And my teenagers are kind of, they haven't gone through all the lessons, but we're working through that, and maybe they'll help me redo the language so that it would be better suited for teens, or maybe just do a leader guide specifically for teens, or maybe just a different cover. Who knows? But the basic premise is still helpful. So if you want to if you still feel that stirring and you don't want to do it alone, Pinpoint Your Passion is really a good workbook to kind of pick up, and hopefully that'll help you. Okay, next, how to just spiritually discern this new direction. So some practical ways to pray for clarity and direction. Just basically, you don't have to buy my book to do this. You just spend time with God, praying, journal through your thoughts, that he's listening to you, and he will reveal the next step in his timing. Listen to the Holy Spirit in your quiet time. Hearing God's voice is crucial for confirmation on the next step. If you are going to walk in a different path than you were previously, you need to have confirmation from God's word and through your Christian community. That's always not just a plus, that's essential. Discernment is actually a word you've probably heard of. It's just a big fancy word for the ability to judge well. And in these seasons of our life, when we feel a stirring and there's a crossroads and we might pivot to something else, it is very, very crucial that you ask for wisdom and ask for discernment during those times, and bring your community in through those decisions, and seek God in God's word and hear his voice clearly. It's very important. I also have another resource called Clarity Compass. It's just a mini workbook that can help you determine if you're missing practical steps that are stealing your joy and fulfillment. And it might not be that I need to do another career or another start a business or do a ministry. It could be that I just need to have a good schedule and a hobby, and healthy habits can possibly fix that. And so that stirring could just be, hey, I really just need to make a few changes in my life that will help address some of those more emotional, psychological factors, but that it's not necessarily career oriented. When it comes to, if you're a stay-at-home mom, that's more specific to you guys. But if you're a working mom, or if you need to work because you need to bring in some income, or you are in a career that you're just feeling that discontent, that holy discontent, it could be a lateral change that is in order. But again, you have to seek God for that new direction that might come. The third thing, I don't know if you knew I was numbering, but the third point that I was going to share is letting go of the old to embrace the new. So if you find and come to a place where you are spiritually discerning a new direction, you kind of sense God, what direction that is, that he's leading you to something new, then your obedience first requires surrender. But hear me, we might have some surrender, some obeying to answering this new phase for our life, but we need to have enough trust to walk that out, our faith, to trust God who's trustworthy. So when sometimes he does not reveal the next step if you haven't done the first step. So if he asks you to do something and you haven't done it, and you want to have the big old picture first, you want to know everything's going to work out perfectly first, he may not give that to you until you obey and you surrender the first thing. Surrender means I'm not in control. It means I am surrendering to someone who now has my life, my fate in his hands, and it feels a little bit out of control. But I'm telling you, it is for our good. How do we release that control and step out in faith? One foot in front of the other, one obedient step at a time. Obey in this step, in this day, and then he'll show you the next, and then the next. And that's how you walk and keep step in the Spirit. So that's one thing as far as just surrendering. So next we come to number 4, common fears that can keep us stuck. One is the fear of failure. Yes, you might fail. I mean, I've failed. Believe me, I have started stuff and I've fallen flat on my face and I said, hey, this did not work out. And maybe I didn't hear right from God. And I am not, especially when it comes to business and all that stuff. The reason why I wrote Pinpoint Your Passion is because my journey was so windy and was so full of twists and turns. I failed a lot. So failure doesn't mean also that you didn't obey. He cares more about forming his character in you than he ever cares about your success. He can cause success. That's not his concern. He's mainly after your heart. So I know that is not fun news to hear, but it's true. He cares more about your heart and your character. And in the process, of course, he will show you how to provide. Of course, he will lead you down the path that is his will for you, for your life, if you seek him with your whole heart, right? And surrender, really. But the measure of success isn't about what it looks like on the outside. He understands our heart, and he knows that that's what he wants. He doesn't want you to be super successful and your heart to be far from him. Success is not something to fear either, because, God has blessed people and he's allowed people to prosper. So that is not evil. It's the love of it, is that your heart is drawn to those things. It's what you do with it once you are successful. Do you say, hey, look, I built my kingdom, I built my ministry, that kind of thing? Or is it like, God, what do you want me to do next? I'm here for you as I always have been. I love you. Also in the process that might keep you stuck from moving forward, even if you feel like you have heard from God, is fear of judgment. Remember what Jesus said, and this may sting a little too. For I am now seeking the favor of God, of people, or of God? Or am I striving to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a bondservant of Christ. Galatians 1:10. So if you still care about what people think and like how they're going to react to you obeying God, then you might be on the wrong train, my friend. This one is going after God. This one is following Jesus with reckless abandonment. If that's what you are after, then you have to let go of what others think of you and think of your decisions. And there's a difference between caring about what others think as far as your appearance and versus soliciting wise counsel, okay? But there is a time and a place when you solicit wise counsel, but then you also know what God has called you to, and you've had that confirmed. Sometimes you keep soliciting counsel because you just don't want to go out and do something that's bold. I mean, I just feel like our culture, especially American culture, I feel like we're really not very bold in our faith sometimes, and because we don't want to shake the boat and we don't want to look off. And I think we've seen, I'm not talking about those crazy characters that are really not submitting to God's word and are not submitting to God's community, but I am talking about what if God does tell you to do something that's kind of different, are you going to say yes? Yeah. So my greatest fear is missing God's will. And how can you be sure it's God leading you on? So that's definitely genuine, for sure. I feel that too. That goes back to getting just to know him and reading his word. And it says, my sheep listen to my voice and I know them and they follow me, according to John 10:27. Now, granted, at our recent church youth retreat, we did talk a lot about doubts. Jesus himself called his disciples out on having doubts. He wanted us to own them instead of ignoring them and letting them fester. And here's a mystery, but no less true. We can move forward even in doubt. In fact, we should bring our doubts and fears to God. Let it push us towards God, not further away, because he sees what's holding us back. He sees what's preventing, and he wants to help us with those things. And he will and he can if we let him. I would say the best way to overcome fear is with scripture and prayer. And A lot of times if it's love, your motivation by love, says there's no fear in love. Because fear has torment, and a man that feareth is not made perfect in love. And if we say we love God, we don't let fear rule us. And that shouldn't be what gets to have the front seat and make our decisions. It can be present, doubts can be present, as we press forward in obedience and trusting God. Fifth is balancing your calling. If you're a woman, definitely, and I'm sure if you're listening to my podcast, you probably are. Balancing your calling with motherhood if you are a mom. So that's what I talk to. It's obviously called Creative Calling for Christian moms. So I think that you probably might be a mom or a Christian mom if you are listening to my podcast. That's the assumption anyway. If you're not, you're still welcome to listen. But as far as balancing your calling, first, I just want you to know that whatever your calling is, whatever God has called you to, I can guarantee you that your calling to do whatever it is that He's asked you to do and motherhood aren't in conflict. And that is something I will definitely speak more into, but I know that what He's called you to do, your idea of it might be in conflict with motherhood. But that's why you need to have your interpretation submit to the Lord, because two things that God has asked you to do are going to be able to mesh well. If God has called you to do something beyond being just, if that's all He's asked you to do, a stay-at-home mom, because that's all you can handle, that's good. That's fine. Own it, love it, embrace it. Ask the Lord to help you through it, because that in itself is enough, I guarantee you. But if for some reason He's given you this extra ability to do other things, and you have that pull and drive and call and stirring to do something tangentially, He will give you the wisdom and insight to make it work. Please, please do not try to take it and run with it, because you will get burnt out as a working mom, and you will get burnt out as a mom. Those things will burn you out quicker than anything, because those are two hard routes. But He can show you how to adjust and still make it work. I believe that. I know for a fact, I'm like, you called me to be a mom. And more than that, actually, for me, He's called me to be a homeschool mom, and yet still build stuff and still do things. And people think I'm crazy, like out of my mind. How do I find the time? And I do have to be more schedule oriented about things. And I do have to be balanced about my kids, even though they're homeschooled, like they have to be, kind of at least on their own, independent in their room at a certain time where they don't need me, or they have to help me. Okay, well then you have to help them read a book to them, or because I know I need to have this time set aside to do work on the computer or do a podcast or whatever. And it's not because I've chosen it. I used to do this type of stuff. I had like 3 businesses at one time while homeschooling my kids. And let me just tell you, burnout central, right? That is not how to do it. I've done it. I've been there. I've definitely regretted it. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about every single thing you say yes to has to submit to the thing that God has already called you to. So if you're a mom, you're already a mom. So what have you said yes to that you haven't run by God first, right? You have to run it by God. You have to run it by your husband. You have to run it by, the sanity test. Is this going to make me crazy? That kind of thing. And those things matter, and God cares about you. And He can make it work out. And I've seen it in other women's lives too. He can make it work out when you seek Him first about how should this look like, right? What does this look like in, don't just take the culture's cue. Okay, this is how it's worked out for women in the past. And I tell you, working mom, I don't just like, oh my God, how do you do it? I'm like, no, I think that some things are being sacrificed that maybe shouldn't be. Single moms don't have that option, and I definitely have a heart for you and compassion. And I will tell you, Christian community, I'm talking to y'all right now, support your single moms, please. The ones especially that don't have the ex-husbands helping out, please reach out to them, because they are doing it all alone, and that's not okay. Okay? It's not okay without us helping and coming alongside them and making it much easier, because they're just too hard. It's so hard. I mean, Navy wives fall into that. I know trained wives fall into that, but it feels very similar in that they have to do a lot of it on their own. Or if you know a married woman that is having to do a lot alone because of just the nature of their relationship with their husband or their husband's job or whatever, you, at least for a season, help them out, man. I mean, that's what we should be doing when we see someone just drowning, right? Okay, so I believe that you can, with God's help, find a solution. If God is calling you towards something, then we just have to think outside the box, and God can give us that wisdom if we don't have it. What does it look like? This is my question. What does it look like to be a present mom and a purpose-driven mom? Okay, one is not exclusive to the other. There is such a thing as work-life balance and putting family as a priority, but God dreams don't really die. They are reborn. If they must return, it takes a different look. I have seen it happen. It is amazing. God took all the things and he said, I'm going to burn everything up in smoke, except I'll keep your words. I'll keep your, I think it was poetry was at the time is what he said. And everything else, it felt like burned up in smoke. I couldn't do anything. I was pregnant. It was the only pregnancy I'd ever had where I was actually sick. I know I'm blessed to not have ever had that before, but I really was not nauseous before. I was tired with other pregnancies, but not nauseous. But my last one, or my fourth one, I did have a miscarriage, but my fourth one, I actually, I was really nauseous, and I couldn't do any of the jobs I had done previously while homeschooling, and while homeschooling and while parenting and everything. But I guess that was God's wake-up call for me to say, hey, like, you're doing way too much. And I know people might think I'm doing way too much now, but honestly, I have a different perspective. Everything else has to go in alignment. It has to go through my God priority first. Is my husband okay with this? I run a lot by him. Even if he doesn't like it, he might be like, oh my God. No, but he does. He appreciates it. But then I know that he was put in my life to say no to some things. And then when I didn't have good boundaries with saying yes to everything. And then lastly, I ask, is this something that I can truly, realistically, knowing myself, do this, and, I didn't have those boundaries and those priorities straight before. And I feel like I do now. I mean, I'm still a mom and things happen or whatever. But for the most part, when you have those priorities straight first and that you will not compromise on, that's just what matters. And that's why you see some women be able to have more joy of life, because they've got what their core values are, they're not compromising on. And so we may look different in how we live life and everything, but if you aren't compromising your core values, you have a lot of joy. And that's usually just a side note, but there you go, for free. Number 6, taking the small steps towards your God-given purpose. How to take action without being overwhelmed. And this is kind of what I already spoke about, but one step at a time. Pace yourself. If you find yourself getting overwhelmed, you might be taking on too much as a mom. It has to look different as a mom. Same goals, just the iteration of those goals has to look different. If you're going to make it work where you are a stay-at-home mom, then it's definitely going to have to look different. If you are a working mom, but you just want to be more intentional and how to be able to be there for your kids, it's got to change. Some things have got to get adjusted, and you got to ask sometimes your boss, even though you feel like, oh my God, but yeah, you got to ask your boss to say, okay, this is my value and this is worth going to bat for. Maybe not the extra bonus. This time is something you cannot get back. And that is probably what I have found to be the utmost, especially for a mom, the utmost biggest commodity ever, time. You cannot get back. It flies so fast. Your kids to be in high school, I've known so fast, and you don't know where the time goes. Everybody always says that. I promise you it's true. But yeah, you do not want to give up time as much as you can. Trust God's timing, speaking of timing, and provision, and your God-given need to rest, take a shower, practice self-care, let guilt get out of your head. I know that a lot of times you have to balance a lot of these decisions with finances, and I live very differently, and not everybody can make that decision when it comes to homeschooling, because we're homeschooling, but we are not rich. And that is a very interesting dynamic there, because you're having to sacrifice a lot, and things don't come easily. And my husband has had some unemployment issues in the past, and we have suffered some things, for not for righteousness' sake, but just for a season of our life that things, you have seasons where that you can't catch a break, and it could be your decisions making it messing it up, and it could be God allowing it. So some of it could be both, and it's not something I'm gonna harp on, because I know not everybody is in that situation. Some people may have more free income to be able to make decisions a little bit more freely, but I can honestly say that we were probably more free to make this homeschooling decision, and when I was younger, because we had I think at the time God was just good. I've probably mentioned this story before on if you stuck with me on previous podcasts, but I've mentioned the story about my husband and I actually were, we started out when I was first pregnant with my first, we started out, he was unemployed for a whole year. I know that sounds crazy because he's struggled with it before, but yeah, he was switching from sales to, and we've talked about him not pivoting well and all that fun stuff, but I love him, and he was switching from sales, and I think to IT is when that happened, and he just could not catch a break on those interviews because they kept wanting to offer him a sales job, and he was like, no, I'm trying to get out of that. Believe me, we had sales job after sales job after sales job, and both of us were ready for him to get out of that. So I was very supportive of him in that regard, but I was pregnant, and I had my job not for 9 months. And I actually, I'm sure everybody would have been pissed at him. I'm sure I was some days, but, cause I was the only one working. But what people don't see under the hood, right? You see this beautiful, easy to this situation, I guess, our situation, our marriage, you can judge it from the outside all you want, but you don't know what God's up to. I did. You can look and say, okay, he's not working, and you should be so pissed at him. And I'm like, well, actually, this is an answer to my prayer to God. Not believe me, not Ace not working. It was, I told God, the one thing that was preventing me from saying yes to homeschooling was that I didn't believe that we could afford homeschooling, just afford life and everything on just one income. And when I was saying just one income, I was talking about my husband's income, because he made way more than me at the time, even with the sales job. And no, God proved to me for a whole year that we could survive. Well, most year, I think it was 9 months, but that we could survive on one income, mine. And I did not make very much at the time. So once he pretty much proved that, all the way up until my husband did not get a job offer until we were in the hospital. And he actually literally had to say, my wife just had a baby. Can I come in for an interview tomorrow? So yeah, God's timing is hilarious in that. And And again, people can judge that situation, but between me and God, I knew what he was trying to get me to see. And it definitely revolved around finances and me trusting God to provide for us financially. And I'm not saying that we have done everything perfectly. I am just saying how crazy trust falls that God sometimes does with me. That being one of them. And so yeah, that we used to be a 2-income family for sure. And then I started making money on the side for different things. And because I did not go back to work full time for anyone, I actually, for the rest of my kids at home, I actually, and this does not have to be your story at all. I mean, I love you guys. God works in different ways in how we all do our families and our incomes and everything. That's not what I'm talking about. But just in general, I've actually found creative ways to make money from home, and only recently have I literally have had to rely on because I have little time, and I've been it's just a new season, and I feel like every step forward that I'm trying to, I used to try to make up for my husband's. I just was I was just being a Sarah, I guess. A lot of times I was being a Sarah and being like, okay, God, I know you've tried, you want to go through this, but what if you do it this way instead? And I can be. I realize I have given Sarah, Abraham's wife, if you wonder who I'm talking about, I've given Sarah a hard rap for a long time about how could she just not trust God and wait on God. No, I'm guilty. I am so similar to her. It's not even funny. So in order for me not to make the same mistake as Sarah, because I literally, during the COVID unemployment season, I literally started a business single-handedly. And yes, that did help financially, but I was like, yeah, did I have to do that? God, yeah. Sometimes we can be the solution, but sometimes we are actually being a Sarah. So there is a difference, and the only way for us to know the difference on, are we trying to lean on our understanding, or are we using the wisdom and knowledge and skill sets that God has given us? How do you know the difference? And I would say if you know God's in it, and if God's leading you, and that's the main thing. So that's why it's super important, people. It's super important to know that you have confirmation about these next steps that you're moving forward in. And I mean, I honestly, God still used it. God still used it to financially bless my family. God still used it to make great networking connections that I still have to this day. I saw God still use it. That's the beautiful thing about our mistakes sometimes, is that God will still choose to work within our personality. I mean, he chose to use Jacob, even though he was a conniving person. He worked within his wrestling spirit and transformed him still to a very trusting Israel. So anyway, that was a tangent. But next, I would say biblical encouragement when you enter your new beginnings. So looking for, of course, I already mentioned about God's word, but what God is saying to you does matter. As I said to you before, even Moses said, if your presence doesn't go with us, do not leave us up from here. That's from Exodus 33:15. You got to move forward in obedience, but walk in step with God's spirit. If he says wait, then wait. If he says stop, then stop. If he says, okay, what you need to do right now is to not necessarily wait, but just reflect and then continue to move forward, but reflect about what you have done or have done in the past or about to do now. Learn from your experiences, pivot, or just simply as a child, go to the left or the right on what you had originally thought he was leading you towards. Just listen to his voice. That's basically what I'm trying to get back at, is just listen to his voice. In fact, when I wrote Pinpoint Your Passion, it was out of obedience. I promise you, it was not because I felt like I had everything together. and that I felt qualified. Oh my God. It was not out of knowing all of what God was up to through it, what he was going to do through it. But, which I get that kind of glimpse now. And I'm so amazed at God, and I'm so amazed at what he's done in the classes that I've had and through the book, that it blesses me. But all I did was just I trusted his leading, and I obeyed what he kept, just very patiently, but very insistently, kept prompting me about. And if you want to help, if you do want to help, clarify the process, obviously I've seen it help people, but that in itself, that workbook in itself was an obedience, a step of obedience for me, and a leading. In fact, I talk about imposter syndrome in the workbook, because I was like, if you're reading this right now, then it worked. What I suggest about overcoming imposter syndrome, I was like, it worked, because I actually wrote it, and I'm right. You're reading it right now. So it was kind of so cool how God kind of was writing my story through it as I was writing the book, and it was so cool. And it's so real, and it's so helpful. But this is totally, if you want to get the workbook, that's fine. But this section is mainly for you to help recognize if God is stirring something in you, like what the steps are that would help you kind of move from feeling that stirring to, like we talked about, to like discerning a new direction, letting go, embracing the new. Then, okay, the fears that might help prevent you from moving forward. And then how do you have balance in that? And then we talked about steps towards, not feeling overwhelmed, and how can you live out your purpose without being so overwhelmed. And then finally, just looking for God's encouragement through his word is perfect. So the next action step for you after you've listened to this podcast episode, if you really resonate with it and it feels like, yes, that's what God is leading me to, that's where I'm at right now, I just encourage you to pray and to journal and ask God what he may be inviting you into, what that next step looks like, and how help you clarify what he might already be stirring in your soul.